Welcome back to Highly Respected. I'm your host, Scott Greer, and today we're having a special episode because we are on a Sunday. We are not on a Monday because of the breaking news that had happened over the weekend with the attempted assassination or the assassination attempt against Donald J. Trump at a rally in Pennsylvania. So we definitely need to talk about this, and this is why we're having it on a Sunday rather than a Monday. I don't think anyone's going to be disappointed by that, but we've got to get this talking points out there and commentary out there while the fire is hot and while this news is still there. And this is a insane event. This is, we've seen so many crazy things over the last 9 years since Trump came down the escalator. We had COVID. We had Trump winning the election in 2016. We had the Black Lives Matter riots in 2020, the George Floyd social revolution. We have a president who is mentally incapacitated, who can't string along sentences, and likely is suffering from Parkinson's or some other type of mental degeneration. So, and we've got wars going on in Russia or in Ukraine and Gaza. There's just so many crazy stuff going on, and even in Europe, the European elections, and throughout this, even with how much hate Trump has drawn towards himself, with the amount of just insane rhetoric about Trump, that he's going to be a dictator, he's going to end democracy, he's going to do this, that, and the other thing. How many, we now see an assassination attempt on him, a full one. You could have said some of the things in 2016, like there was one time that a guy charged up on stage to try to tackle him. Maybe that could count as some sort of assassination attempt, or at least an assault attempt. But nothing of the sort of just somebody getting up a rifle and trying to shoot him. And it's more surprising that we haven't seen this yet than it actually happened. Yes, he's had Secret Service protection for at least 8 years. And when he was president, he had, he was the main focus of Secret Service protection. And ever since then, he's had a little less Secret Service protection. They've even tried to strip him of Secret Service protection. But he has not had, one of those, like some guy sitting on a roof or something with a rifle trying to kill him. And I think that's probably one of the most surprising facts about Trump, considering the just over-the-top rhetoric that we've seen about him ever since he came down the escalator 9 years ago. That there hasn't been that attempt. And, when we they want to say we don't fully know the shooter's motives. Well, we can assume it's from a left-wing direction. We don't know the specifics. Maybe there's, some of this may be confirmed by the time you're listening to this, but there's, rumors out there that maybe he was transitioning and maybe he was upset about trans issue. Maybe he had been, so opt by the media that thinking this guy is going to end the democracy if he is elected, and especially now with like all these news channels and prominent Democrats saying we're going to lose and we're going to see our democracy go away because Trump is going to win. And maybe this guy been watching too much MSNBC. I mean, he's 20 years old. I don't know how many 20-year-old kids are watching MSNBC. Could have been watching, some type of streamer repeating these points. You don't know. Or maybe he just wanted to become famous. But I don't think, I don't know. I don't think that's the case. It's likely for left-wing reasons. Specifics, we don't know, but we can assume. And even like there's these, ridiculous liberals who are like, he was a registered Republican. It's like, oh yeah, it was a Republican trying to kill the Republican nominee. It was a wayward Trump supporter. Yeah, I don't think that's the case. It was clearly somebody most likely driven by left-wing politics to try to kill him. But they're going to be like, we might never know the motive. I have a feeling we're going to try to do a Nashville school shooter thing where it's like, well, we don't know why this person did this, and they'll try to hide a manifesto and all this. I think it'll be harder because the victim is Donald Trump, and he will be demanding that they release this information. He definitely doesn't want this, under wraps, I don't think. But I think the media will be trying to be like, we don't know the motive. So, in any case, I think that's one of the first things to take away from this is that I'm surprised that there hasn't been more like this. We've had assassination attempts throughout history, in American history, but I mean, we never had a public figure where so many people thought he was the devil. Of course, we've had people upset at certain presidents, George W. Bush, people were really upset about. Obama, people were upset about. There was this assassination attempt of Obama in the 2008 presidential election where two skinheads were planning to try to take him out. And this was the top news for like a week, for weeks. I was even in high school at the time, and I even knew about it. And generally, if something filtered down to high school kids, and all the kids in high school knew about this, that's how big of news it was. And so they really wanted to hype up the like racists are trying to take out our first black president. I guess it worked to elect him. But I mean, there's always been people wanting to harm these leaders. And it's just the same even with celebrities. Celebrities get all these crazy stalkers and stuff. They don't have Secret Service protection, of course. But, we just have all these maniacs out there. And so, but with Trump, no one can compare to the amount of hate he receives and the amount of just heated rhetoric that all the media is blaming Trump for. It's time to turn down the temperature on the heated rhetoric coming from the same fucking pundits who have been saying this guy's going to end democracy and have been saying things like we need to eliminate him. We need to put a stop to him. We need to put him in the target. And now they're like, well, Mr. Trump, after the attempt on your life, you really need to tone down the rhetoric. I hope you learned your lesson after a bullet nearly killed you. This is what they want to go with. But I want to say that. So it's, I have a couple different takes. So that's the first one I want to get out of the way. Now we got to go to the structured ones because there's just so much to talk about with this. And, I'm still forming my opinions as we go along. But there's just a few things that we got to get out of the way. One, I think a lot of people want to say this may be a conspiracy, deep state. Maybe they try to get him. As you guys all know, I'm not into conspiracy theories. So generally, I think it's due to Secret Service incompetence. I think if you look at a lot of the agents around him, they were all these like hefty women who looked like their guns were about to fall out of their hands. It did not look like an impressive sight with these. And they did a horrible advance work that, no one bothered to consider this building, within like 200 yards away where somebody could get up there and shoot at him. And that all these Trump rally goers were like, hey, there's a guy walking around with a rifle. Hey, you guys want to check this out? And, it's just a complete measure of incompetence, I think, with this. Some people want to blame the snipers, but apparently the rules of engagement for Secret Service is that they cannot engage until fired upon, which maybe you want to change that, but imagine if Secret Service had just fired on somebody and, he didn't have anything. The media wouldn't have been wanting to charge Trump with murder for that. In any case, the sniper fired within seconds, and, that sniper, if he hadn't been there, if he had taken the action, that kid could have killed Trump and killed more people. It's very fortunate. I think so you want to blame the snipers, but if they had not reacted as quickly as they did, I mean, you have to think it's like that's still, most people don't react that quickly. Okay. And so these guys are trained and they did save Trump's life. They could have saved it earlier. You could have maybe said or done, maybe ensure the guy didn't fire in the first place. But the fact that they took him out, that guy could have gotten off more rounds and could have killed Trump and killed more people. And I don't want to really blame the snipers because they're clearly, white guys, ex-military likely. There are people that we want to defend. I'd rather blame the higher-ups, the girl bosses, rather than the snipers who still did their job. And, they still, protected people. So I don't really like casting blame on them. So I would say that this is more incompetence on their part. The one thing I do want to say with the incompetence angle, I do think it's fortunate that this, well, I don't know if fortunate, but it's a good thing that this happened now and that Trump will now get additional Secret Service protection and that they will now take this stuff seriously. Because I think over time, as more liberals and leftists see the poll numbers and as media rhetoric about Trump escalates, and they're all predicting like Project 2025 is going to deliver the Fourth Reich and all our freedoms and liberties are going to go away if he gets another term. There's going to be more attempts because all these people are going to be blackpilled and they're going to be like, I can't live in a country where they're promising this. And imagine you're just an ordinary person and you're getting all this shit into your head about how terrible a second term is going to be. You could imagine at least a few people would want to take drastic action. Thankfully, he's now going to get better protection. And so his life will be better protected. And I think the Secret Service is going to be much better about this. And there's going to be a lot more scrutiny around Trump rallies. And they're going to be, extra anal about this stuff. This type of failure won't happen again, or it shouldn't happen again. Now, if it did happen again, I would be more open to the conspiracy theories that somebody is at the top is trying to allow this to happen. And I don't think I even need to say this, but just to, make it clear, it is a true blessing, divine blessing that Trump did not die. It would have been absolutely the worst thing in the world if he had died. Because some people always like to say like, oh, the accelerationist argument, oh, this type of stuff, we need to disabuse people of this stuff. No, if he had died, they would have found, just regardless of Trump, like Trump is our guy, he is our avatar, whether, with all his failures and something, he represents us. He's our champion. And it's a tremendous loss to have him die in such a manner. So that in of itself, the devastation and loss of Trump himself is just irreplaceable. But then what they would try to replace him with would be terrible because they would get, like Nikki Haley. I guess, she finished second in the primary. Maybe, and he hasn't picked a VP. Who would they go with? They would likely go with Nikki Haley or somebody else, that they would pick. I don't know how the rules would work, but they would find somebody who's worse, and then that person would not be representing America First values and interests, and the GOP would go back to business, back to pre-Trump status quo with him, and we would lose that figure, that energy from Trump, and it would be the benefit of the establishment for him to go away. And so we are extremely fortunate that he didn't die. And I don't think, and people want to say like, oh, there'd be mass riots and stuff. It's like, no, there would not be. I think there would just be tremendous grief over his passing. But as we've seen time and time again, it's like our people outside of, I guess J6 don't turn to violence. They don't turn to the type of Antifa, BLM type stuff we saw in 2020, with the one lone exception of J6, which the 1,000 people or so who were most energetic in that went to jail for a long time. So you don't really have that type of masses. I don't know what people would do. People would just it's like the leader is gone. There's always like sci-fi things and things. It's like if you kill the leader, the head's cut off and the body doesn't know what to do. And that's really what would happen, is that people would just chicken with its head cut off. They'd be running around not knowing what to do, and the Republicans would put a replacement head. It's like, we now have Nikki Haley, and a lot of people would just sit back and vote for that. Wouldn't be as energetic, but they would take that because they wouldn't know what the direction they would go in. So Trump staying alive is critically important. Is extremely important. For future of our country, for anything. And I even think, Vivek, he always likes to go with bombastic rhetoric, but he's like saying like this would have been a bullet into our democracy. It'd be an end of our democracy as we know it. I don't know if it would be quite that, but it would be the end of, a middle American revolution that Trump inaugurated, and it'd be back to business as usual. And so, it would be undermining our democracy. And, there is no one to really step into Trump's very large shoes at the moment. Now, blame for the attack, it's obvious. It's Democrats and media. I mean, they've been inciting this stuff. Like, unless for some reason this kid was just, probably had a mental illness. That's not an excuse, because every mass shooter has some degree of mental illness, but they never, when some kid says, oh, it's for some right wing reason, they never say, oh, it's because of mental illness. So none of these people are ever mentally stable. Maybe he did just want to get his name out there and he wasn't political at all. I doubt that, but we'll find out in the future days, or hopefully we do. Unless they'll try to do the, as I said, the Nashville school shooter, which I think the media is going to try to do. And they're like, how dare you speculate about motives? How dare you do that? We can't speculate about motives. But the media is 100% responsible for this. The Democrats are. Just as I said before, the insane rhetoric they've been putting out for 9 years, and especially now, and also with the media's, going more black pill reason, thinking that Biden's going to lose and that they're stuck with Biden, and them desperately trying to figure out a way to get rid of Biden, which they can't. Just a little aside, because I don't want to, I've talked about this enough, but they're not going to get rid of Biden. I was seeing these takes come out. They're like, this is now proof they are going to get rid of Biden. This is going to have no effect on them being able to get rid of Biden. I think this is a help to Biden, because it changes the news cycle from how he's senile and losing his and can't form sentences to assassination attempt of Trump and Trump himself. So this is a benefit to Biden. The news cycle finally changed. They're going to think it's small-minded to talk and petty to talk about how we need to get rid of Biden. Democrats just don't know what to do. Despite his continuing errors, there was another call this week where somebody wrote a note, it's like, stop being defensive. And then he read it. He's like, stop being defensive. Come on, man. And then he read that on the phone call, which, just shows his state of mind. But he's not getting out. He just had rallies where all these people, largely black, were saying, don't quit. We want you, Joe. We want you. And they're screaming, and he knows that. And Dr. Jill certainly heard that, and so did Democratic leadership. And, when he mistakenly called Zelensky Putin, which is what an all-time gaffe for a president. It is definitely the worst gaffe a president has ever delivered. Because there's no excuse for it. There's no excuse for it. Somebody joked it's like, it's like FDR introducing Winston Churchill. He's like, ladies and gentlemen, Hitler. And it's just like, there's no excuse for it. But there was reports, like CBS reported that, there's going to be dozens of Democrats to call on him to step aside in the next 48 hours. There's like a handful. There isn't this avalanche of Democrats calling for him to step aside. So, if anything, the shooting is going to keep Biden, because it takes away news focus, which is what Democrats have been trying to do. The only reason that there's been more Democrats and, this being a major focus is that there hasn't been any other news besides Biden's continuing mental deterioration and the greater focus on it. But now there's going to be talking about the RNC and the assassination attempt for the next week or two, and that's going to be the major focus. And that momentum for Democrats is going to go away, and they're supposed to have a virtual nomination of him for Ohio sometime before the end of the month. And once that happens, it's over. He's the nominee. So back to how the media has been treating this. And also I have to say is that actually I forgot to bring this up, is that I've gotten two Cotton Elite questions about this, both from K-Max, so I need to read them out. All the topics we have today are Cotton Elite related. So as a reminder, you too can get the power to ask me questions or suggest guests and topics if you sign up for the Cotton Elite option at Highly Respected Substack, and that's at highly-respected.com. And make sure to sign up for the IQ supplements while you're there. So yes, the first one that deals with the media. He says, in your view, all the Armageddon rhetoric by CNN, MSNBC, New York Times responsible for this? Yes. Despite claims of right-wing threats, it really is the left that always ups the ante on violence. Correct. Yeah, and they blame in various right-wing shootings on Tucker Carlson and other right-wing figures. Trump gets shot, and even if he was killed, what do you think the media would say about Joy Reid, Rachel Maddow, Bill Maher, and Bill Kristol? I don't know if Bill Maher would really fit in there. They would take zero responsibility. No, they would never take any responsibility for this. I mean, they are responsible for this, but they would never blame themselves. I remember when the baseball shooting happened. The congressional baseball shooting where Steve Scalise nearly died, and several of them nearly died. I mean, if that guy was not a terrible shot, he could have killed like at least a half dozen congressmen. But he was a terrible shot, and there was one Capitol Hill police officer who decided to engage with him, and that prevented deaths. And they were not even supposed to have Capitol Hill police there. I think it was only because Steve Scalise, being in leadership, brought him along. And, he brought him along. It was just like, oh, I guess I'll bring him along, which that saved a bunch of Republican congressmen. So I was working in the news, 7 years ago. I was working in the news industry at the time still, and they all blamed Republicans for this. They all blamed Trump. They were like, there was no blame to be had on Democrats and liberals. And they would just talk about it vague. It's like, oh, there's some violent political rhetoric, which we need to tamp down. And we need to stop. And, a lot of these idiotic Republicans joined in. There was this one congressman who survived it, and he found a bullet in his bag. And he pulled out the bullet on air. He's like, dramatic. He's like, this is an example of how we have to tone down the rhetoric and we have to get along. And then the media's like, that's so true. Thank you. Because as long as they weren't blaming liberals or Democrats or particular media personalities, that was fine. It was just a generic, we all need to tone down the rhetoric. And if the media wanted to blame someone, they blamed Trump and Republicans for this. So they were like, well, you've been so violent, and your extreme policies are driving these people to want to kill you. So, but we're blameless. And then, they had this hunky-dory, we're all getting along together. And then a week later, the media began once again saying that Republicans want to kill all old people because they're wanting to get rid of Affordable Care Act. They wanted to get rid of Obamacare, and they're wanting to kill people. And that's how the media was like really into that stuff about Obamacare when the attempts to repeal and replace it, is that they want to kill everyone on Obamacare. This is genocide. They're plotting genocide. There was rhetoric like that the Republicans were plotting genocide. And even the guy who did this was like some, leftist who was worried about healthcare and was clearly pushed into this direction by the media rhetoric on Republicans and Trump. But then the media blamed Republicans and Trump. There was no responsibility taken. And the same thing's going to happen this time. There's no need for them to take responsibility. But it's a different situation now, media climate, and even social media, from what it was in 2017. In 2017, that was the default position, and anyone who suggested otherwise was going to be the one harassed by the media. To say, oh, it's completely blameless, but if we're going to blame anyone, it's the Republicans. Democrats and the media are totally blameless. But let's all, work together and come to an agreement that this is all Republicans' fault, and we're all going to tone down the rhetoric. Meanwhile, once this is over, we're going to start saying Republicans are wanting to kill immigrants and poor people through their policies. So they didn't take any responsibility. But they can't really get away with it now because the media doesn't have as much of a stranglehold as they did in 2017. Is that fewer people are tuning into the news media. Social media is much more either apolitical or right-wing, like Twitter is now. It's all right-wing rhetoric that's now populating Twitter, especially in the aftermath of Trump's near assassination. There's not anything left-wing about it. So at that time, you do have people like, oh, wish they had, better aim and stuff. But that was like 100% common. Like there was like real like columnists and pundits who were like saying, oh, I wish this guy had better aim. And they're like, well, I shouldn't apologize. These people want to kill poor people. So how should we apologize? And there were several people who celebrated, Rand Paul getting assaulted and having to go to the hospital. Many prominent people were celebrating that. And even when he got attacked during BLM riots or other Republicans got attacked, there would be celebrations of that. But it was completely different because I remember, when there were aggressive town halls in the early 2010s with Tea Party stuff, they're like, these are assassination attempts. But then when there are aggressive town halls in the early years of Trump, and these people were like threatening to kill Republicans and even trying to attack them, the whole media was celebrating it. So they're not going to take any responsibility for it. They're just going to kind of imagine that, the gun lobby or something took control of this gun to shoot at Trump, and the real solution is gun control or something, and Trump lowering the temperature, which is just hypocrisy. But that's what they're going to try to go with. But they are responsible for it. And as I said at the beginning of this podcast, I'm surprised that there have not been more assassination attempts of Trump. But K-Max's second question, he says, if Trump had died in this assassination attempt, would the right wing have some strong reaction or protest? I mean, I kind of covered this before. The jury in finding him guilty was one thing. A leftist protester murdering Donald Trump and the GOP appointing Nikki Haley in his place. If that act did not get a right-wing reaction, nothing would. Your view, Scott, if this bullet had killed Trump, the right-wing reaction to that? I mean, it's hard to predict, but I don't know what people want them to do. It's like, do you want like a full-scale violent revolution? No, that's not going to happen. I don't, as I said, earlier, it'd be like, cutting off the head of the body, and then, it's like a chicken. No head off, body's just running around not knowing what to do. And I think that's what would happen. I think a lot of people would be extremely depressed and blackpilled, but you don't know what people would do. And all the thing you have to remember about the right wing is that all of our people have stuff to lose. And also they've got jobs and stuff. And, it is a weekend, but what do you expect them to do? We're not quite in the same way where, Martin Luther King died. It was assassinated. And all these ghettos had already been rioting before. They're all congregated in one place, and, they don't have anything better to do. They don't have work. They don't have anything to lose. So they're going to start burning down their city. Trump supporters are not going to burn down their suburbs and their small town. Okay. And nobody would try to organize anything because they're all afraid of what happened after J6 too. People don't want to be sent to 4 years in jail just for being in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I don't think there would be, the reaction would just be internal. It would just how people react. I think it would be, that's why it would be terrible, because all these people would just, like, any type of hope in politics they would lose. And instead of like how right-wingers imagine, then they'd want to take on revolution. No, they just start focusing on something else. They give up on trying to change the country or trying to make America great again. They would move, in a darker, I don't know if darker, they would just move into another direction. And so I think that's how the right would react to it. And I think, whoever they pick to the convention next week, they would just say, oh, well, I guess that's our person. And most of those people would, reluctantly vote for that person, and, we'd move on from it. And I think a lot of people don't want to accept that, but it's also like, well, what do you expect them to do? We don't have, we're not in control of the urban ghettos where they'll just like burn things down and everything. And if we did, the left would love that, because they're like, oh, now we can send out riot squads and National Guard to put down these Trump supporters, use live ammunition. They would probably love that. But our people aren't going to do that. They would not know what to do. And there'd be no one to tell them what to do. And eventually they're just like, well, here's a new nominee, and hopefully you guys vote for them. And that's why it'd be terrible, because there wouldn't be any type, this wouldn't be this acceleration process. As I said, generally worse is generally worse. And if people get these, as long as people have, something to lose, and they have something, to hold on to, if they have a home, they have a job, they have a family, they're not going to turn to, radical solutions. They're just going to, be bummed out, and they're going to move along with their life. And that's most of the right. Because I want to say this is like we're having, there's a larger take I want to have with this. Actually, one thing I want to, before I get into that, I do want to praise Trump of how courageous he was. This, and I think this is why I want to give a white pill in response to that, because a lot of people, I think, want like, oh, the right is going to, make this country shake, and we're going to have real change in response to this. But without a leader, which there is no successor leader to Trump, it's not going to happen. I want to say this white pill is that after this assassination attempt, I'm all but certain Trump's going to win. The image of him, pumping his fist with blood across his face and being defiant and saying fight, fight, fight is an incredibly inspiring image. And even people who don't want to vote for Trump are going to like that image. And I think they're going to, assassination attempts does generally does generate sympathy for a candidate. I mean, George Wallace his campaign wasn't doing well, but then he nearly died from it. He was paralyzed from his assassination attempt in '72, and he began winning primaries out of sympathy vote. He didn't go on to win, but he did get sympathetic support from us. And I think that's going to be a lot of Americans' reaction to this, because assassinations would have really, Trump dying from this would have really scared people. There's the left that would have celebrated, and that's another thing that would be terrible, is like how much the left would have been celebrating for this. And, what would we do? I could see that, there would be these small scale violence, like, somebody Trump supporter goes into a store and see somebody celebrating, and then they try to beat them up, or, turn to lethal violence, something like that. That would be mostly what would happen. But you'd have all these people mocking us in front. That's what would make it more blackmail. But for a lot of the normie Americans, they would just been horrified, because it rocks the boat too much for a major figure to be assassinated. They don't really like this. This is why the Kennedy assassination is so strong in our public mind and our public memory, because that's not supposed to happen. That's creates too much instability and disorder and chaos for people, and people don't like that. If you rock the boat too much, and it creates a chaos effect. It's also on 9/11. It really burst Americans' bubble, and COVID. And people lose their minds over this. And so when you have a presidential candidate who's a former president, possibly assassinated, that would really not sit well. And that's why American people would just try to grasp onto anything that would be a semblance of order from the chaos in response to that. And that's why I think the country would just carry on with it. It would be a complete gift to the establishment if something like that happened. But the larger point I want to say is that for this podcast is that, with all the craziness that we're having this year, as I said, Ukraine war still going on, Gaza, Biden's continuing mental deterioration, Trump being convicted, Trump, and even last year, Trump being indicted. You've got an open border bringing in tens of thousands, really hundreds of thousands of migrants. There's been over 10 million brought since Biden became president. And you have all these migrants taking over cities, even small towns. There's that story of a small town in Ohio that's now has 20,000 Haitians that have just popped up. And there's so much craziness going on. And there is also the fear of rising crime and just declining quality of life, AI coming aboard, and, that creating more chaos and, disturbance. So it's a very, by news events, you would think that this is a much more tumultuous country than it is. This is a country ready to explode in a way that you would have seen in 1968, when there was a lot of political assassinations. And, that was a time where if you were saying this country is descending into civil war, you could have said, okay, there's a point there, because, you have these mass race riots. You've got this war going south in Vietnam. You've got political leaders being assassinated left and right. You just have, there's something, this country's at a boiling point. You even felt this way in 2016 a little bit. There were riots, not nearly the way 68 was. And you certainly felt it in 2020, with the mass amount of riots and just COVID and people just losing their minds. And then you had J6 after the election. There was, the country was reaching a boiling point. But you really don't feel like the country is at all reaching a boiling point now. When this happened, I was at a bar last night and, they didn't even turn it on. And clearly these people knew about it because it happened like an hour or so before. And people are just carrying on with their lives. And I don't say that that's like everybody. I could imagine if you had been a bar in Huntsville, Alabama, that people would have been glued to the TV and, upset. But, it's not, people are just going to carry on with their lives. And it's also, the thing about it is that all this craziness, with, our senile president and our presidential candidate who was nearly killed, this is all happening while Americans are tuning out of the news. That we're a less politicized country than we've been since, the early 2010s. Now, people are not following news closely. They're not as hyper politicized. People are just focused on sports betting at the moment. Now, you could say there's not a lot for them in sports betting at the moment because all we have going on out of the major sports, all we have is baseball. I don't think many Americans are betting on the Euro Cup, but that's mainly what there is. We don't have basketball, no hockey, and clearly no football. So we don't have anything like that going on. The social turmoil is not felt by society as a whole. The turmoil is just like for those who are still involved in politics, but the amount of people following the news is at a record low. The amount of people, consuming this content, people are focused on other things right now. And I had that personal experience, but I mean, if a lot of people listening to this could have just said, hey, I was at a bar and everyone tuned in. I was talking to somebody who was at a bar and that they turned off the news because it was bad vibes and they kept it off and they just turned it into sports. And, it's like 9/11. It's like, we're just going to go to a sitcom rerun. We're not going to have the bad vibes of that. It's like, it's a major historic event that just happened. This is a major news event. People want to know about it. But I think that's an understanding is that, like, this is bad vibes. We want to be enjoying life right now. And so this is like goes to the point where, some people are like, oh, civil war is around the corner. You guys should have known political violence is coming. And we're kind of having political violence happen independent of like mass political violence, that's what you need for this type of civil war or social, conflict of the sort. We aren't really having Antifa violence at the moment. We aren't having the type of mass left-wing violence. Of course, you just have these lone madmen who go out and try to either shoot somebody, as we're seeing with Trump assassination and some of these mass shootings. That's really the political violence. But that is just something on an individual level, which we have a lot of crazies out there, and they have the unique ability to inflict harm on people by just going into a school or finding a hidden place at a rally and trying to make their mark. But this is not large scale mass riots that are happening. Are people getting organized into militias of some sort, like serious militias, or a breakdown in state authority? These things aren't happening. We're not going to have a civil war, okay? We're not going to have a civil war when most of the people, the young, men with a lot of energy and passion that are the foot soldiers in any civil war, are too busy blowing all their disposable income on sports betting, and they're not really paying attention to politics at the moment. And I think that's also what's happened with some of the differences between the 2010s and 2020s is that 2010s is like millennials got really into politics and really into news, and that's what all their social media feed was, and this is what made them go out and march for either Antifa or even very small number went out for alt-right or maybe even the Proud Boys. Even the Proud Boys might have been more Gen X there, but this is what made them join the groups. But Zoomers aren't really doing that. Of course, there are politicized Zoomers, but the young people right now are just focused on, Zen and stuff. And even the women aren't as political. I mean, they are left wing, solidly left wing, but they're not as politicized or as like engaged in politics like millennial women were in the 2010s. I mean, some people wouldn't like this, but this is a good thing for Trump because something like this upsets people, and right now people don't want to rock the boat. They just want the status quo. They just want to focus on all their interests. And an attempted assassination on Trump disrupts that, and that generates sympathy for him. And they're like, well, we better support this guy to keep the order going, keep everything in order. If we had a lot of these people hyper politicized, they'd be leftists, and that's a problem. We don't want Antifa returning in type of mass formation that it was in, say, 2019 and 2020. We don't really want that happening again. So it's better that these people are more depoliticized, so it's easier for Trump to be in office and to do what he wants without hysteria and freakouts all the time. And without these massive women's marches that happened right when he was inaugurated in 2017. So the point is that, there's so much chaos at the top, with Biden not being there and, losing his mind, Trump, getting near assassinated, yet the system just carries on. It's a remarkably resilient system that we have. And I think a lot of it is we just have built a system that can just keep going on its own. It's like a driverless car. No one's I don't know if there's really anyone at the wheel right now, but it's just going on, it's carrying on. And I think most people, have a assumption or an implicit agreement just to, everyone just wants to carry on as it is before, at least the majority does. So there's not this as much chaos as you would imagine. Because if we were having this stuff in any other country and any other point of history, there would be a lot of turmoil. And, this would be reflected in riots of the streets and, armed violence between citizens and other things. But you're not really seeing that. It doesn't, only in the fevered swamps of right-wing Twitter do people worry about coming civil war and all these things happening. But it's like, who would the civil war be between? People who have something to lose versus the state, that's not going to happen. Our people aren't organized into anything. And as I keep repeating, I always say, our people have something to lose. We don't have these collection of drug addicts and hobos and petty criminals like the left has to call on, who have nothing to lose, like the lumpen bourgeoisie and even the lumpen proletariat. We don't have those types. We have the stable bourgeoisie and the stable proletariat, the people with homes, families, stuff to do. And, they don't have a leader either. So the fact of the Civil War, it's more just like a way of getting more social media engagement than anything else. But that's not the black pill, because, we've got the white pill that Trump's going to win. And Trump, I didn't finish this point, but Trump was it's incredible how he rose to the occasion. Completely cool under fire. He just got shot, and he gets up and starts, he's aware of the crowd. He knows that they need reassurance. He shows that he's a leader, because those people look to him. Because they're worried, they're frightened, they don't know what's happening, they're worried about him. And he pumps his fists and he's fight, and they just go nuts for their leader. He knows that they needed that reassurance, and he knew, he had that situational awareness that, despite the threat to him, despite, nearly dying, that he has to deliver a message to his people. And he showed himself as that leader. That's like a great, general or warlord, in a battle, that they need to know that their leader's still alive. And, it's like him, after being wounded, he gets on his horse and takes the banner to let them know, soldiers know that he's still alive so they can continue on fighting. And that's what Trump did. And that's why he's our guy. There is no one else but Trump, because only Trump could do that. And And there's that close personal connection with the people because you could just see on people's faces the worry and the fear they had when Trump went down. And then when he get up, they went nuts. It was something that something terrible happened to him, and the fact that he pumping his fists and waving to them, that's the message they needed. And so that's an incredible, powerful moment. And speaking just big picture, how can this man lose? How can he lose with that? Memes become reality, and how can a man survive an assassination attempt and lose to a vegetable? And so I'm very confident that Trump can win and can advance our cause and advance, make America first again, make America great again by winning. And so, don't put your hopes on the masses being woken up by a violent and terrible event like Trump being assassinated or something else to push them in civil war direction. Let's focus on what's realistic, and the realistic possibility that could happen looks more almost certain to happen in November. So I'm very white-pilled about that. So I don't want people to take that the wrong way. It's like, oh, you're blackpilling, say that people won't do anything. It's like, look, I'm just understanding that our people are smart, that our people have, that these are the logical reasons of what they're going to do. And what do we expect them to do? I don't like to tell people fantasies. I don't like to indulge in that. I like to look at things with cold, hard facts. And the cold hard facts here say, like, if you want to expect, something that's going to get you more Twitter engagement and saying, oh, civil war is coming, whatever, that's not going to happen. But if you want to tell people something realistic that would be something good to happen, that is going to happen, like Trump winning the election. And, we just have to rally around Trump at this point. I have a few criticisms, not of Trump himself, but some of the things the campaign is doing. Later on the podcast, I'm probably writing an article about it. And some of the decisions the RNC. But Trump himself, it's time to rally behind him. He's our leader. He's our guy. We need him to win in November. It's not the time to be worrying about petty squabbles. Like, we're in the middle of a battle. He's our general. He's carrying us to victory, and we need to follow behind him for this election. And so that's what I want to conclude on. So I got a lot covered there, but we've got a few other kindly questions we're going to get to. Now, we got two from New England refugee. One's going to be really quick, and the other has to deal with the RNC, and we're probably going to have one or two others. I'm debating which to save for the mailbag. But anyway, the next question comes from Mystery. Mystery asks, hey Scott, have you seen the article? Trump is planning for a landslide win in the Atlantic. I'd love to hear your take on it. It has me a little nervous that the campaign is run by idiots and they're going to blow it, especially when combined with some of the odd and over-optimistic polling results. 20-plus point swing to Trump by minorities and Zoomers sounds like bullshit. Also, why are these idiots talking to the fucking media? Nothing good can come of it. And then you had a follow-up. The article paints a picture that they're running an extremely experimental ground game that some people think won't actually achieve the kind of turnout we need to win. The main problem with the article, first off, Susie Wiles and Chris LaCivita, they do know campaigns. Maybe I'm not the biggest fan of the strategy, but I want to talk a little bit about the ground game. They're going with a little more experimental because they're not investing as much in standard ground game operations as before. And what they're really trying to do is find people who are not likely to vote but like Trump and making sure that they get out there and vote. And that's their main strategy with turnout, and also with their turnout strategy with persuadable voters, it's to have micro-targeted ads towards them to sway them. And so they're running a little bit different campaign that's different from standard campaigns. Now, I think there are problems with Republican get out the vote operations because they shit the bed in 2018, they shit the bed in 2020, and they shit the bed in 2022. And it has not been a well-run operation with the standard RNC procedure. So there is calling for something different. And a huge factor in this race is going to be whether he turns out his core supporters that are not that reliable of voters. In the past, Republicans had the most reliable voters. We had middle-class white people, and those are the most reliable voters in any election. But now a lot of those voters are turning Democrat. So they're trying to bump up the total for working class white voters, which are not as reliable in turnout. But with the fact that Trump's now on the ballot, which he wasn't in 2022, they hope to actually achieve that, the goal of the turnout. So I'm not a ground game expert, and I think the people who are criticizing it are people who have failed to win elections as well. And so Susie Wiles has won an election in 2018 with DeSantis, and DeSantis was not expected to win in the gubernatorial race, and he won. So Susie Wiles has some idea of what she's doing. The main concerning thing is a long-term Republican strategy of who they want to win over and be a part of their coalition, which outside of like how you win elections or anything, it presents a problem because they want to have this multiracial working class. And she agreed with a statement from Matt Gaetz. They don't name Gaetz, but I assume this is from Gaetz, where he says, for every Karen we lose, we gain an Enrique and Jamal. And Susie Wiles agreed with the interviewer, who was Tim Alberta, who I don't know if they should have granted him all this access. There is a point that Mystery is saying is like, why are they talking to the media? People like to highlight what they're doing. And, it's not an embarrassing article. People like the attention and whatever. I've seen a lot worse profiles and other things. This is tame by comparison. Even though Tim Alberta is very anti-Trump, I'm not sure why they chose him, but I'm glad they did this article because I felt the article was informative. Maybe they shouldn't have granted him as much access, but it seems like they didn't get him as much access as he claims. They just sat down with him a few times, but that's it. In any case, they're talking to him about this, and then Susie Wiles agrees with it. And she's like, "Oh yeah, that's our new strategy. We're gonna be picking up a lot of these Black and Hispanic men, but we're also gonna get the Karens too, who are worried about grocery prices." There's issues with this. One, first off, a big campaign strategy is protecting the vote and countering Democratic shenanigans. The target of all the ballot harvesting is largely Black voters and Hispanic voters. A lot of these men who may be pro-Trump on camera, or if you talk to them, their ballot is already going to be cast for the Democrats. That's how it works. Or they're not allowed to vote, or they're just not going to vote in general. These are the least inclined people to vote, is Black and Hispanic men. Most of the Black vote is female. Not much of it is male. So if you're winning a lot of the male vote, that doesn't help you in elections. And Hispanics in general are just not a reliable voter demographic. They're nearly 20% they are 20% of the population. I don't think the census is fully accounting for them. Obviously, a lot of them are illegal immigrants, which are not supposed to vote. Most of them are probably not voting, but in any case, they're at least 20% of the population. Yet they're only 10% of the electorate. So they are a very low turnout demographic, and so it's not as important to win them over. So meanwhile, Karens, middle class whites, are the most reliable voter demographic, and we're losing them. And we can't compensate by winning Enrique and Jamal, because Jamal's vote is already locked up for Democrats if he's allowed to vote, and Enrique is just not going to show up to vote. Both of them are probably going to show up to vote, but this is not the best strategy. And so I'm going to write an article about this. It's more of how the GOP wants to imagine themselves. I think Trump's going to win no matter what. And the turnout is that the one thing I'm skeptical of is the protect the vote initiative, which yes, we do need to protect the vote and, pass new laws and regulations to ensure that we are limiting mail-in ballots and limiting ballot harvesting and other means. But I don't think that this effort, putting it's like a legal strategy is the best use of resources and money at this point. I think it would be better to do more traditional get out the vote, but I think they're still going to win regardless of how they're running the campaign. But I think the long-term strategy, which of focusing on non-white males to replace middle-class whites, is a terrible idea that is not going to play out well when we no longer have Trump on the ballot, because this strategy, it'll it'll work this year because Trump's on the ballot. So these people are going to turn out. But it's not going to work in 2026 when we're up for a midterm and these people aren't going to turn out because Trump's not on the ballot and they're just turning out for standard Republicans. And standard Republicans have alienated middle-class whites, and middle-class whites are going to just vote for whoever's Democratic. And it's also going to prove a problem in 2028 as well. So it's a problem. It's a problem long term, and it's not unique to the Trump campaign or Susie Wiles or anyone else. It's just that Republicans have decided on this strategy, and conservative media likes it, even though sometimes they'll condemn it. They do like this idea of the multiracial working class. But if you have a multiracial working class party, people are not turning out to vote, and thus whoever has most reliable stock of voters is going to win in off-year elections and potentially presidential elections if you don't have a charismatic person like Trump at the helm. So this is an issue long-term for Republicans, which I am going to write an article about for Tuesday, hopefully it's for Tuesday, about this multiracial working class strategy, which also goes in with some of the choices like having Amber Rose speak at the RNC and other things. Like, it makes more sense to get 50 Cent or Lil Wayne. 50 Cent would probably be fine. Not my preference, but he is like a famous rapper while you're just getting the girlfriend or a woman who fucked famous rappers. I don't know if that's really what the strategy you want to go with, but it is part of this this hard strategy of trying to win over black men, and I don't think that's just a fool's errand in my opinion. So that is Mystery's question. Now we've got a few others. I'll answer one of the new ones. We have two new people have signed up for the IQ supplement, or for the cognitive leak question, which we're going to... Actually, I'm going to answer both of them because, they're new guys. We got to give them a shot on the show. So the first is Anon Zamoiski. I had to look up the pronunciation for this. And he asked, I said I was going to have for mailbag, but I want to get him today. He said, it's obvious that leftist notions of feminism, environmentalism, gay rights, etc. won't survive the Great Replacement in the long term. Unfortunately, it's also obvious that many, if not most, leftists are willing to prioritize their anti-white sentiment over all other issues. Nevertheless, I'm curious whether you think white identitarians would ever make inroads with principled white leftists by appealing to their liberal concerns. Is this a pipe dream, or worse still, would toning down anti-leftist rhetoric only further distance white advocates from the mainstream right? There's a lot of leftists who go over, but it's more that they just get mugged by reality. Any type of leftist who's kind of moved in embracing identitarian concerns, it's that something happened. Is that like they experienced a mugging, or there was a murder on their street, or they're starting to notice that nobody at their kid's school is speaking English. They are made aware of our issues. And you really can't make a reasonable argument. It has to be a direct experience that they felt, usually crime or quality of life to them, that will make them change. But it's more that they're not as committed to this stuff. And then they switch over. But trying to win over leftists, this has been like what Wignat's been trying to do for years, and they haven't really won over them. It's more that they have a shared dissenting outlook and more of a hostility towards mainstream society that they hope they can win over leftists with, but it hasn't really worked before. And so I don't think really appealing, some people would like to use environmentalism like, hey, look, these immigrants, they litter and they throw trash on the ground and such, but they don't care. They're so firmly committed to this idea of multiculturalism and diversity being so good and that whites are so bad that their other issues will take a backseat to that priority. And they're also so subservient to the social taboos that they won't try to go over. So with white leftists, I don't think it's worth tailoring our message. And generally what the tailoring the message is like, well, we believe in having healthcare for all too. It's like the fact is we're not in a position to grant healthcare for all. And a lot of the reasons that they support healthcare for all is so more white wealth is redistributed to the other groups. So no, I don't think you really went over that many. I think it's better to stick with. Well, let me rephrase this. It's better to actually try to appeal to mainstream conservatives, which people don't like because they view them as too mainstream, or there's much more of a hostility towards conservatives than there is to leftists. And also, leftists to a lot of the dissident right and Wignats is like minorities to normie conservatives. Like if there's a leftist who like says like immigration is bad, they all like soy jack, like, we're winning. Oh my God, it's a leftist who agrees with something and with me. It's the same with like normie conservatives, like this black guy doesn't like Democrats, soy jacking at the moment. But the people are more likely to be won over to our arguments or people with vaguely conservative ideas. There will be leftists and people with some liberal views that will, switch over when they're young, but it'll generally be a personal experience that will make them turn to the right rather than some argument they heard on Twitter or something. It's more personal experiences. So maybe if you want to schedule muggings for liberals, I don't suggest that. Because sometimes they'll be mugged and they'll still be committed. It depends on the type of leftist. If it's somebody who's just like vague leftist views, it's like, oh yeah, I guess Black Lives Matter. And then they, get robbed and the guy tells them a white bitch during the time or something, maybe they'll, something will make them start to question things. So that's my opinion on it. I think it's better. You're going to get more people by appealing to the mainstream right than you are to the left. So now we got Jersey Guy. In reference to the proletarianization of white males, I was recently speaking with an executive at my company. He most likely earns a very solid wage and lives on upper middle class. He told me that his son, who just graduated from high school, has decided not to go to college and instead has opted to go to trade school. I was shocked when I heard this, but it is actually pretty consistent with white males electing to drop out of elite positions in society. And speaking with other millennial parents, more and more people are telling me that they want their kids to go into the trades. All these parents have gone to college themselves. I'm a little older than you, but when I was in high school 20 years ago, this mentality simply wasn't there. Most parents wanted their children to go to college, even if they wanted to be a police officer. Is there a way to reverse this trend? These parents, as well as the executive at my company, are not online people, so this trend is certainly in the mainstream. By the way, my children will be going to college, and we set up savings account soon after they were over. That is great. I think there's a couple things here. I think if you're coming from a fairly elite background and you're like you're like a very successful executive, your kid probably has the IQ and aptitude to go to college. The problem that was happening with college is that they were being flooded with kids who shouldn't have gone to college. I went to a college where most of these kids should have just gone to trade school. And a lot of guys, even my fraternity and stuff, they ended up as HVAC repairmen after college or police officers. It was like, well, what was the point of going to college? And so that was the issue. But if you have a smart kid who would be going to good school and has the aptitude to, succeed in college, we shouldn't be trying to force them into trades. And more of the message is for people online where they're talking to young kids who are very political, likely bookish, or the Zoomer equivalent to bookish, because I don't think even the smart Zoomers don't read. And we're telling them like, hey, don't go to college, even though you might have aptitude to be a great lawyer, we need you to be a plumber. Now, I think for some parents that maybe their kid is not that bright and is not that bookish, and by not that bright is like not that into school, and maybe they're just kind of, it's not their thing, and they're like, you know what, I want my kid to go into trades. That's not the worst thing in the world. But I think if you want your kid to be into an elite position in society, you're going to have that. But I think it's also like some Zoomers are going into this mentality because, I saw this stat on recently college grads within the job market and unemployment, and the unemployment rate is almost 13%. I'd have to double check on it, but it's in the double digits. It's like 12% at least. And that's really high. And I think when you see numbers like that, a lot of these kids are like, wow, maybe I should have gone to trade school. And I think that's more just like how bad the economy is right now than trades, and there is a huge demand for trades. At the same time, I think it's like who this message is for, and I think it's more that schools and society should be picking out who are the kids to go which paths more than their parents trying to push their kids into that path when otherwise that they're pretty bright, they can do college work, they could succeed in a white collar job, and instead they're being pushed into something that's maybe not to the best aptitude, and it's other further depriving us of having that material for a counter elite that we need. But I think it's more the school's responsibilities and society's responsibilities to get people on these tracks to where they should go. Like, I think if you did have trades class at your high school and you were finding the kid who's like, not doing very well in social sciences, but he likes to, work with cars, putting him in that path and then saying like, hey, you can make a decent income from this, that's where it is. But I think it's up, schools don't tell that to people. They imagine that everyone is the same and they put them all on the same path, and thus it's up to the parents. But it's generally more conservative parents that want their kids to go into trade schools rather than liberal parents, and then that leads to more white conservatives barring themselves from these positions that they could have. So it's up to the parent. The main problem I have with that is that it's all people online who went to college, and they're telling the smartest, most right-wing kids who have the aptitude to go to college, and telling them that they absolutely shouldn't consider college and that they need to become a plumber, and that's the only option. And then they complain about this idiotic video where these girls are dancing. It's like 5'3" and an attitude. Gen Z boss in a mini. Gen Z boss in a mini. And it's like, this is what workplace and white collar jobs are going to be. They're going to be completely feminized and idiotic. And we're not going to have white conservatives in these jobs like actually make an impact. But the fact is like, we may laugh at these girls. These girls, if they went to another career, or I don't think working in the skincare company is going to, which is where they're at, is where they're going to have much influence. But girls like that are going into law. Those are going to be the ones picked for judges and running law firms and making important decisions in our society. And that's what they're like. And meanwhile, our people are going to be the plumbers just fixing their toilet and having to follow along with the rules and regulations they set. So it's about picking out the people and figuring out and getting them in the right position. But it's more the school's responsibility to figure out where the kids should go rather. And I think a lot of parents, even though they have a really smart kid, they would, they're just like so anti-college. They're just like, nope, you're going, this is the path I set for you, even if it's against their wishes or against their better judgment. So that's my opinion on that from Jersey Guy. Now we've got two questions from New England Refugee. Once we pull them up, he said this is supposed to be for Monday, but obviously it's a Sunday. So he said, for tonight's RNC opening night, do you think they will have the smarts to keep it waspy and straight laced? If we see Kid Rock or other ICP members holding court, I'm afraid this might hurt Trump. I'm pro Kid Rock because he's white and he's generally pretty based on the issues. He even had like wearing a white boy hat. I forget what else was on it, but he was, Kid Rock is fine. Having some cultural figures is fine. I think it's Amber Rose is the bigger problem. And I don't know. The GOP's been so starved for culture that if they had got like 50 Cent to perform and Kid Rock there, there's a lot worse things. But it becomes more of an issue when you have your, speakers who shouldn't be giving talks, do talks, and then the content of it where they're like, if they're going to keep repeating like, we don't need Karens anymore, we need Jamal and Enrique, that's the wrong message to give. So, I don't know. It'll probably be mostly just straight lace, but there could be elements of not being straight lace. And I don't think Kid Rock is the worst example. I think Kid Rock's fine. He's solid on all the issues, so he's all right. I would personally not like 50 Cent there, but he's very popular, and it would signify cultural cachet that Trump has. It's mainly Amber Rose I don't want speaking there, and some of the other individuals that they might have. But I think that they will. I think they'll do fine. I think it'll be mostly straight laced and fine. The bigger issue is, as I said, wanting to direct it towards the multiracial working class rather than focusing on increasing the white middle class vote. And then his final question is very easy. It seems that the Dem base hates the American flag. It was that way in New England since about 2005. I love the flag and feel like we should monopolize it. Normal people still love it. We should not be ridiculous with it, but it seems like an easy win. I 100% agree. The left has given us a gift by making patriotism and Americana right-coded, and so we should fully embrace it. And a lot of liberals, such as Joe Scarborough and this article I wrote, Lib Patriotism, are trying to take back the flag, but it's too late. Their base does not like it, and they find it a white supremacist symbol. So it's a political advantage for us. So we should take it to maximum advantage for ourselves. And so that is a short and easy answer to that question. And that is it for this highly respected. We're going to have back to our normal schedule. So we'll have an article for Tuesday, mailbag for Wednesday, article Thursday, and IQ supplement on Friday. So that will be our schedule for this week. So nothing for Monday since we have something on Sunday. So that's it for today. Tune in for the rest of the great content. So until next time, stay respected.